when I went into property flipping, it was obviously had that light bulb moment. I'm like, gee, okay, there's something in this. The price I would have been able to get beforehand versus once it was renovated, and when I sold it, okay, it's significantly different. So if I can do, one house, that's potentially 100 grand. If I can do 5 houses, I might be able to make 500K a year. My goal was to do 8 houses in my first year. So, like I said, I think I did 7 in my first year. So,
welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show for Australians who want to learn how to unlock their full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and to live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life that you really want. Let's get started.
Hi, freedom fighters. Are you sick of feeling stuck in the treadmill and caught in a rat race in a job, or JOB, which means just over broke, that you don't like and gives you no time to do anything that you enjoy? And if you do have the time, you're just too exhausted to do anything with it. Are you interested in investing in property more as a way out to get your time back? But you're concerned about having to stay in your job and wait for another 15 years or more before you can make the break? If investing in property is the answer, is there a better and faster way to grow your wealth and replace your income than buying and holding a property long term? What if there's an alternative property pathway that can make up to 150 grand in just 90 days? It can go on to help you make a couple of $1 million in profit in just 4 years. Because this is exactly what today's guest has done, and he's going to unpack the nitty-gritties of what he's done and how you can do it over the next 2 episodes. Given the massive increase in national property values that's occurred post-pandemic due to the incredible stimulus that's been poured into the economy, along with a period of historically low interest rates, followed by a migration tsunami spiking housing demand during times of very limited supply, Australia's just experienced the second highest property boom in the 260-year history of our great country. And during this time, home values have increased by an average of 38% across the board, according to CoreLogic, with the greater areas of Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane enjoying the great affordability catch-up, with growth of over 70% against a long-term average national growth rate of between 5.4 to 6.8% a year. So we've effectively seen 7 to 13 years worth of growth occur in just 3 to 5 years. And this has brought forward growth, and it's likely to mean that many locations may well come back in value slightly and then flatline for a considerable period of time, like we're already seeing in the ACT, Victoria, Hobart and Sydney, unless an area is going to experience new future growth drivers to new improvements in infrastructure, industry and incomes, or what I like to call the 3 I's of growth. So if you're coming into property at the peak and you don't secure the right property in the right growth area, then hold and hope may end up being very slow and painstaking. And unless you're good at identifying the shrinking number of outlier growth driver locations, which only hindsight can tell you despite the massive profit predictions that invariably miss the mark, then it's likely that you're going to have to become a more active investor in order to achieve superior returns, while also managing the inherent increases in risk and active time commitment associated with shorter-term property opportunities. And if any of this is sparking your interest and you want to explore more in relation to the specifics of your situation and what's right for you, then feel free to book in with me for a one-on-one personal solution session by clicking the link in the show notes now. And if more active, shorter-term property approaches are tickling your fancy with the potential to manufacture equity quickly, then listen up, as this is exactly what today's guest Graham Whitfield has managed to do. As you're about to hear, what some would see as a disaster has triggered what he now sees as a diamond, where a tenant who trashed one of his investment properties leaving 35 grand's worth of damage has been instrumental in him becoming a millionaire in a matter of years by converting his original form of FIFO, the old fly-in, fly-out, to more profitable flip-in, flip-out, but more on that later. So how did he do it? How has he turned property tragedy into triumph? And how can you learn to do the same? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out now. As Australia's self-professed unhandiest man, Graham Whitfield's an active property investor turned coach, specialising in property flips and buy, renovate, hold strategies. As the founder of Redmayne Coaching, he's passionate about helping you and others think outside the box and leverage creative approaches to achieve your financial goals through active property investment. So this week, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritties of Graham's personal journey before digging into his actionable flipping insights next week, where he's going to share the success secrets of his Redmayne property coaching course. So I'm really looking forward to our great conversation. So welcome, let's get invested, Graham.
Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to the deep dive.
Mate, I guess just to kick things off, and you're a good sand groper, and I've spent a fair bit of time in the West. I always like to sort of kick things off with a bit of a smile. So can you share with us a bit about probably your favourite funny story that you or others tell about you that sort of captures who you are and what you're about?
Funny story for me would be, I'm 40 now, but I'm always someone that likes an adventure and probably always had a bit of a risk tolerance. So when I was 18, so just out of school, I actually left home for Europe on a 6-month holiday with $500 in the bank.
That's a pretty slim budget, mate. So you must have made some instant friends on that journey, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there was meant to be a job lined up for me in Edinburgh at a pub, and when I got there, I found out that no longer existed. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I found myself working in a pub in south of England, and I ended up traveling Europe for 6 months, and it all started with $500 in the bank.
Love that, mate. It's probably an early indication of what you later did on a much bigger scale, which we'll unpack shortly. But mate, I guess just to crystallise then, in terms of who you are, what do you do differently, and why do you do what you do, Graham?
Well, I mean, different to who, right? Like that's a pretty hard question, I suppose. But look, for me, like I just know I'm responsible for me. I'm, responsible for my actions and what I'm going to get in life, as far as results and that. It's all going to be, from whatever I put in, sort of thing. So what I put in is what I'm going to get out. So I just try and always have an open mind, always, try and be positive. And I just try and essentially, take as many learnings from everything that I'm doing and learn from other people that have walked the path that I'm wanting to walk, sort of thing. So glass half full, not glass half empty. That's I don't take kindly to people that have excuses, that blame circumstances or their own life for not being how they want it, because at the end of the day, I think ultimately we all live the life based on the choices that we've made.
100% agree. Well, take us on a bit of a Reader's Digest journey of your life so far, if you like, and we can go from the trip to Edinburgh and beyond, if you like. But just I'd like you to sort of share what you invested your time, energy, money, and this is outside of property, but property is probably an important part of that journey. And talk to us about how that's led you to where you are and what you're doing now, if you can.
Okay, so are we talking from like working life, or are we talking from a kid sort of thing?
Yeah, for as early as you want to go back, mate. So should I get a sense of what you did and why you did? And you spoke about choices. We all make them. Would love you to share what you did and why and how that's into getting you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think a lot of my motivation and drive comes from like my childhood, to be honest. Like I came from like a single parent family. My dad was like an alcoholic and drug addict, like just not a good guy. And as a kid, we didn't have money. Like my mum remarried when I was, when I was about year 6 or 7, something like that. But we never had money. Like we were always like, and I, for some reason, as a kid, I noticed it. Like I felt that. I felt poor. And it lit a spark in me, like to not be like that. And so that was it. So there was that. Like I know a lot of other kids wouldn't even know if they're poor, sort of thing, when they're kids, but I knew that we were. Like my mum probably wouldn't like hearing me say that, but we lived week to week. We didn't, she wasn't high income earning or anything like that. So I had definitely saw people around within my family that had more than us, and they certainly weren't wealthy or anything like that. But I just felt like, they got a nice house sort of thing in a nicer suburb sort of thing. So I sort of felt that from a kid. So that sort of motivated me, I suppose. When I went to university, had no idea what I wanted to do. Most of my family was all blue collar tradespeople. I just fucking hate that stuff. Like, I'm just not a tradie at all, right? Like, and I remember being, as a kid, my family would always be like, oh, he's never going to amount to be anything because he's, whenever there's hard work, he runs away. That was kind of like the family, like what they'd say about me because, I'd rather be kicking a footy or, shooting a basketball sort of thing. Yep. And I suppose I ended up going to uni, did a double degree in psychology and criminology, never worked in it.
What was the interest there out of interest? Psychology and criminology, that's a pretty specific field. What attracted you to do that, mate?
It was definitely the psychology that interested me. Like and I still think, the study of behaviours, fascinating really. How can two people that you have pretty much grown up in the same environment, lead completely different lives and, so it's definitely, intriguing sort of thing. So, yeah. And I don't know, I always loved crime stuff. So it was kind of like, as a young guy going to uni, there wasn't really anything else standing out. So it was just something I did, like, you know what I mean? But I quickly realized there wasn't going to be a job in that area for me. I wasn't going to be the guy that sat down and listened to people's problems or anything like that. And obviously there's a lot more to psychology than that. I realized pretty early on, like in the, if you wanted to do the criminology stuff, it was down the police line and they didn't earn enough money for what I wanted to do. So I ended up after the uni, I was like, what am I going to do? I got a job in recruitment, and recruitment, is, for people who don't realize, it's actually a lot of sales involved. You're dealing with businesses, so it's kind of business to business selling. You're trying to build, those relationships. And I quickly realized I had a knack for selling. Yeah. And obviously now knowing a lot more about, psychology and disc profiling and all that sort of stuff, I'm a high D. And a high I as well. So I'm definitely someone who enjoys, I'm an extrovert and light selling sort of thing. But my passion wasn't recruitment. So I only lasted in that for a couple of years and I went into selling. And we basically went into real estate. I did real estate for a year and then I went into new homes and I did that for about 9 years. So new home sales, I was really good at it, made really good money. I was always like one of the top sales guys, in the company sort of thing. And and at that, when I was sort of 27, 28, 29, 30, earning, 200 grand, 250, 300 grand a year, I thought I was like, living the dream sort of thing, because you don't have any other bills, you don't have kids at that age. Well, I didn't have kids at that age, that sort of stuff. But I started getting over it because it was like, there was, there's still a limit to how much you can earn and doing that sort of stuff. And from there, but then what happened is the market in Perth, so from about 2015 to 20, it started getting pretty average.
Bit of a lost decade there, mate, to be honest. From 2011, when the old resources sector crashed, I've lived in Perth myself and I've got a brother down at Margaret, so I've sort of got a pretty good sense of it. But it was pretty much the lost decade, really, if you look at it.
Correct. And so I'd obviously had a passion for property. I bought 3 investment properties. They were all heavily negatively geared. About 2019, like every year the income was getting less and less. But it was just a really bad part of the market, or time in the market, I should say. And I had 3 negatively geared properties. My wife quit work, and then we're having twin boys. So all of a sudden our income like dramatically dropped, and so I decided at that stage to get out of selling or get out of new home sales, and I decided I was going to go FIFO. And for me, I hated bloody FIFO. Like, I hated that sort of work. But the job I did wasn't it wasn't physical or anything. It was more of emergency services, just like first aid.
Yeah, let me just jump in there. It's I mean, sitting in this display home selling in they're normally pretty good environments. Probably a lot of pressure, no question. But what was it that in your thinking that said, I need to jump on a plane and spend 1 or 2 weeks away and then a week home?
It was the only thing that without any other skill set, it was only because all I've ever done is sales. It was the only thing that I could earn 150 grand a year, which would have been enough to keep us afloat.
Yeah. Okay, no, mate.
That was it. I wasn't going to get a job in town for, that sort of money. without, and so, like I said, it was, all I'd done is sell homes. So I was like, what else am I going to do? So that's why I did it. But anyway, when I went FIFO, I knew that it was never a long-term thing. For me, it was like, okay, what's next? And I always wanted to be in business. Always wanted to, I knew I could sell. I knew I had like the hunger, the motivation, all that sort of that drive. But I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start a business. But I just had no idea. And I ended up being in FIFO for 2.5 years. But in that last year is when I had an investment property, which obviously got trashed by tenants. That was early 21. Renovated it, realized the profit, realized the opportunity, and then got my coaching, did a program, went all in. Basically, after my first 2 deals, I went full time, quit FIFO, and just realized that I could make 100K, 150K, whatever I could earn that sort of money per deal. And my goal was the first year where I would do 8 deals. So, which I think I did 7. And then, it just grew from there. I obviously started sharing what I was doing, and now I've got a coaching program where I teach hundreds of people around the country.
Yeah, love it.
It's also, and I'm still doing my own projects as well. So it's not like I've stopped doing projects and I just teach people now. Like I've got two projects at the moment that I'm doing, but I've still got obviously most of my focus is on the program now.
Yeah, got it. Well, let's unpack your own journey. We've touched on, and I mentioned in the intro, the tenant trashing the place that sort of kicked this whole thing off. Can you sort of talk us through the nitty-gritties of some of that? Why did you buy that property? What was the strategy at that time? How did it go? Give us the ins and outs and thread the needle for us along what you've done and where, and focus some of the high points and the low points so that you can share some learnings with us.
Yeah, well, look, as far as the properties that I had, the first property I bought was a unit in a suburb called Como in Perth, so pretty close to the city. Look, I did okay out of that property. I think I made about a 90K profit when I sold the property. But then the house had actually got trashed. That was the second purchase that I made, and that particular property was. Look, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, at that stage, I was all of 20. I think I was 24 when I bought the first place, 25 when I bought the second one. I had no idea. Like, I just bought in suburbs in Perth that I could afford. It didn't even cross my mind that I should have invested in Sydney where prices would have doubled, and didn't even cross my mind, right? So I just didn't have that education at the time. There wasn't the same sort of podcasts and property analysts that it was, getting that sort of information and data wasn't as easy back in 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up selling that unit, made a 90K profit, kept on hold of that house. And then my wife, obviously before she was my wife, she bought a property. So we had the two, and then we bought a house, and we got the big mortgage, did the stupid thing where you go out and get the big house, and look at me sort of house, because I was selling homes and thought I was, going pretty well. But when the market started going backwards, it was like I had this massive mortgage, and we would drop from 2 incomes to 1, and obviously plus my income was sliding, and that was probably one of the biggest learnings I've ever had was how silly it was to buy that owner occupier at that stage. Yeah. And that's why even now, like I don't have an owner occupier. I'm just, I'm doing a portfolio property.
Yep.
But, we're renting now in a one of the nicest parts of WA in Yellingup.
Yep.
And, so that period, having to sort of like swallow my pride and obviously, go FIFO because I didn't want to, and did it because I had to. And also, that house, knowing that it was a mistake, buying that property, it set me back years. All of those have been massive learnings, and I've been able to learn a lot from that and take a lot away from that in order to, get me where I am right now.
Yeah, circling back a little bit there, Graham, what was the initial interest in property? You picked up free properties. Why property in the first?
Well, I think
what did you do there?
I don't know what the actual interest was. I just thought that you could make money from real estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then obviously, working kind of in the industry, like selling new homes, you're kind of around real estate, even though it's, it's more sort of new homes, and, it's not really established product. It's not like being a real estate agent. but it's kind of all sort of related. So the interest was you either make money through business or you make money through property. And I was working in sales, so I was going to make money through property. That was my plan.
Yeah, no, makes complete sense. Well, take us through, like you renovated the first one that the tenants trashed and you made some dough out of it. Talk us about the evolution of your flipping approach from there in terms of what were you doing and what were you learning, what were you doing differently so that you can sort of share some of those learnings with us.
So I suppose the first one obviously wasn't really a flip. It was an investment property that I'd held for 10 years. So essentially with that one, there was a lot of learnings. I did a really tight budget on that property. Like it was a very tight reno spend, 35K. I watched every dollar. I didn't have the money to blow or anything like that, And essentially at that stage, it wasn't really in my mind that I was going to then become a property flipper. It was more like I'm renovating this to eventually to be able to sell it and actually make money rather than lose money. That was the thinking.
Yeah.
When I went into property flipping, it was obviously had that light bulb moment. I'm like, gee, okay, there's something in this. The price I would have been able to get beforehand versus once it was renovated and when I sold it, okay, it's significantly different. So there was like, okay, look, I need to investigate this. So I went and got coaching myself and learnt the process. What I was trying to do though is, and for me at this stage, it wasn't about wealth creation. It wasn't about, I'm going to become rich from flipping houses. It was more about, I don't want to be fucking working for FIFO anymore. And I want to be back home with my wife and my kids. Yeah. Flipping houses is an opportunity for me to come home to make way better money than I was working at earning FIFO anyway. But if I can do, one house, that's potentially 100 grand. If I can do 5 houses, I might be able to make 500K a year. My goal was to do 8 houses in my first year. So, like I said, I think I did 7 in my first year. So for me, that stage when I quit FIFO, it was more about, being able to work for myself, call my own shots, be home with the family. It was more about just making money, not creating wealth or anything like that.
Yeah, okay. Now, there's like anything done well, there's a real science and the devil's always in the detail. It's having done some flips myself in the past, for the new and the unwary, there can be traps and that you don't even know about. What sort of and I'll use the word system, did you develop that was easily repeatable and worked really well for you that might be interesting for those listening?
For sure. 100%. The big thing was actually using other people's money to fund the project. So I used money partners, and, fast forward a few years, I've, built a massive Facebook group, nearly 50,000 people in the group. And most of my students in my program that are funding deals, they're using, money partners. So to fund their deals, or at least fund part of their deals. So money partners it's just irony. It's like, wow, people always say that you need money to make money. Well, that's actually not true. Like I didn't have money when I started, and I've been able to get to where I've got to in, realistically more like 3.5 years. But that's happened because I was able to leverage other people's money. So I was able to show, in the first couple of deals, I made good profit, and I built relationships with money partners, and they've, those relationships have grown, and, I've now got, a lot of different money partners I could use, for projects. But that's a big one. Like when you start realizing that there's creative strategies and creative finance for doing deals, that you don't need to have, $1 million in the bank. You don't have to have serviceability. Like I literally had no serviceability. Like I had three negatively geared properties when I got started. The bank wasn't giving me $1, and they didn't. So that's, and like I said, it's not like I had the money to buy a property. I literally, first 2 deals, the purchase price was entirely funded by money partners. So that in itself is massive. But just as well, like when I first started, I was very broad in my reach. Like I was doing, if you look at the first 6 or 7 properties that I flipped in Perth, they were everywhere. Like there was one north of the river, and there was, a couple close to Fremantle, and then there was, a few down in the Rockingham way. Like, they were just sort of all over the shop. But what I sort of realised after year one was, okay, let's really just choose a target area and really niche in a market and just smash that out. And that's how, the next year, how I did, 11 or, I did 8 I did 8 last year in that same area. And, I wasn't even looking for deals. Like, my whole priority was building this program. So yeah, niching and being an area expert goes a long way in property flipping.
Yeah, no worries. Now, just talking about the property partners that you mentioned.
Money partners.
Yeah, the money. For those that are listening and it's like, oh, I've never heard that term before, and there'll be a few. I'm assuming that you're JVing with people who had got the money and they just want to make more, but they haven't got the time, so they partner with you to actually make the deal happen. Is that how I'm reading it?
Yeah, kind of. So a JV partner and a money partner are different. So a JV partner, like you can do JVs. JVs, the way I look at a JV is that two people have different roles within the partnership. Typically, they might both be more active. One might be more out there sourcing deals. The other one might be more project managing. Yes, one person might be funding, one person might be project managing the deal. But that's the thing with JVs. Again, the profit share can be however you guys structure it.
Yeah.
But the difference with a money partner is they're just getting a return on their investment. Yeah. And they're typically not getting a share in the profit. So I typically pay money partners 15% return on investment per annum.
Yeah.
And I'm in and out of a deal in most of the time in 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
So I could be making $100,000 profit and the money partner's making $15,000 profit, because they're in it, but they're getting paid they're getting paid the same amount no matter the outcome. Yeah. Whereas I'm getting paid based on the outcome. Yeah. A money partner can be, like, let's say, for example, me, Graham Whitfield, I could be a money partner. If I've got, a few hundred grand in the bank, I could money partner your deal as Graham Whitfield. I've obviously got a couple of companies that, if one of my companies has money, that particular business, could money partner a deal. Or let's say I've also got a self-managed super fund. I've also money partnered out of my self-managed super fund. So a money partner is really just peer-to-peer lending, and you need a solicitor who obviously draws up the agreements, and everything's all done obviously professionally and security in place. But it's people are assessing you based on, rather than your serviceability, the way the banks do. They're assessing you based on if they like the deal. Okay, this deal is good. You bought this well below market. Yeah, your feasibility stacks up. Your funding proposal looks good. Yep, I believe that you're going to be able to deliver on what you say you are, and then they'll invest in the deal. And this is like entrepreneurs and there's a lot of wealthy people that do this sort of stuff. Yeah, every day. But they're not. It's not. They're doing it on a much bigger scale. So
yeah, no, it's spot on. I think you've opened the eyes. So a lot of people listening will be going, I have never actually thought about that, taking on someone who can just fund the deal and we agree what we're going to pay them, so they know what they're getting. It's a win for them. It's a low risk, low touch, 15% annual return, even if it's only for 3 months, is way better than you're going to get it in most other places at the moment. So works really well for them. Then I guess I'm assuming that you're pretty much finding the deal, project managing any of the lick and split renovations, etc., controlling the costs and the time, the quality on all that side of the equation, or are there other members that you're then introducing to do parts of that?
So yeah, exactly that. So I've got, since I started, I've got a good handyman, good painter, electrician, plumber, tiler, ceiling fixer, like every trade that you sort of need, carpenter, building inspector, a couple of registered builders I've used for, certain structural components. So yeah, so essentially I basically find the deal, I put the schedule together, so the order that they're going to come in and do the work, and then I just engage those contractors. Obviously, you're using licensed trades for your electrician and plumbing, that sort of stuff. You're using registered painters, so you're using people that are registered and licensed to do the works. and I'm just essentially overseeing it as a project manager. And like I said, I'm living in Yellingup now, and I've got, a couple of projects going on now in Perth, and because I've got that team and they've been working with me for a few years, I can do that.
Yeah, and I love that.
I don't have to be there.
Tell us about, and I guess from my understanding, you've done 27 plus deals in that 3.5-ish years or thereabouts. So that's a big number by anyone's score. Amongst those, can you sort of drill into a couple some that have gone really well and why, and some that haven't gone so well and why? I'd love you to share some of the learnings that have come out of all of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've all been pretty good except for one. I only really lost money on one, and it wasn't really like a big, significant loss. I think I don't know the exact dollar, but it would have been probably in the red, maybe 10 grand or something like that. The only issue, or the big issue with that one was two things. It was in a suburb called Fremantle, and I've told this story 100 times, but essentially what happened with this one is I got the market wrong. Like, it was an area with a lot of character homes, and this house wasn't a character home. It was a 2-story home, had a really nice view, but it was when I secured it before the interest rate started going up in 2022. I think I was settled on it in the April. In the May 2022, interest rates started going up, and they went up month after month. And by the time I went to market, July or August or something like that, I think it was August, might have even been August, September I went to market. By the time I went to market, with 4 or 5 consecutive interest rate rises, the market, or the market that I was going for was young professionals. There was it was either young professionals or downsizers, and I knew the downsizers were more interested in the character homes because this house was a 2-story. It also had a bit of a funky spiral staircase, which downsizers didn't like. But because of the interest rate rises, the market just quietened overnight. So I suppose got that one wrong. Even though I obviously spoke to agents, and the agents were all telling me I'd get X amount for it. But then when we went to market, so I ended up pretty much selling it just to break. Even though it was a slight loss, to me it was really just a break even. I'd invested about 200K of my own money into that deal, meant I was going to get majority of all that back and be able to move on. So that was one deal that I got wrong. Apart from that, all the others have been pretty good. I made some pretty good money. Last year I did 8 deals and averaged about 100K profit on each deal, while still running this program, not really investing a lot of time. This year, I haven't really invested any time, but I've got 2 projects, just settled on one this week, and I've got another one settling in about 2 weeks. I've had one other project recently that we just sold, which had a bit of an issue. Believe it or not, the day before settlement, my plumber went to the property and final inspection was all done, everything like that. And those flexi hoses in the vanity?
Yeah.
They're renowned for bursting. It burst. So the house flooded the day before settlement. I could not believe it. But I still didn't lose money on it. It was just a pain in the butt. I've had to, I still made decent money on it, but it set it back. I think that happened late January, and it's just settled Monday. So we're mid-March now. So it sort of set me back about 6 weeks because I had to go through insurance and all that sort of stuff. And insurance, they're paid out and all that sort of stuff. So that was all good. But they're the only 2 negative experiences. And I like to say that the deal I just settled on is deal 28, and the one I'm going to settle on in a couple of weeks' time is deal 29. So I've had a pretty bloody good run.
Yeah. Let's look at the flip side. What's been the best deal you've done, and why? Why is it so good?
Well, the best deal I've done is actually a reno development deal. So this is one of the only development I've done. All the rest of it's been pretty much reno flip. But the best deal I've done was a property that I bought for 600, and all up that project owes me about 1.5 sober, 1.55 or something. And the value of that one now is probably just over 2.5. So there's probably about $1 million. Well, there's it's close to completion. I'm about to get handover. So I renovated the first house. We actually moved into that house, and then we moved out in January, moved down south. But I moved into that house while building either side, and then one of them is essentially is at practical completion. They're just I should get keys next week, and then the one after that will be probably keys the following month. But yeah, that one's has some very good market growth, which is obviously like I really timed that one really, really well. As far as a flip, the best for me was about 170K profit. But I've had many deals where they've been sort of 140, 150, 170. So there's been quite a lot of deals in that price range. Like I said, last year, my average was about 100K profit across all the deals.
And they're sort of, most of them are 3-month in and outs, are they?
Yeah, so I typically can get a reno done in about 6 weeks, and then and when I do it, my trades are all lined up. So I settled on this particular property, and I settle on every property, and then essentially the work starts straight away. The day that I settle, I skip in, rocks up, and then my handyman is in there doing demo the next day. My electrician and plumber are in there that day, disconnecting and ripping everything out, and then the trades obviously put everything back together. So 6 weeks to do the reno, and then Perth's been a pretty good market the last couple of years, so everything's been selling pretty quickly. And then just depending on how good the the buyer's finance situation, if they're cash, they might be able to settle a few weeks later. Like I've literally had flips. I've had a couple of flips where I've held them for less than 60 days from end to end, from settlement to settlement, and that's been because it's been all the month sort of renovation and then a cash buyer, and that's why it's been really, really quickly. But none of my projects are sitting there, nothing happening. Like they're all my flips are, as soon as a settlement happens, like it's all like day after day. There's a different trade there getting work done.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've certainly got stuck in a fantastic time in WA. I mean, we've done a real catch up in the last 3 years, given the pretty high time of the 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, moving forward then, mate, because I mean, the benefit of doing flips in a growth market, you're just turbocharging the profit you can pull out of it, really, because you've added the vision to a property that no one else can see, and then you've turned a pig's ear into a silk purse very quickly, and people go, "Yep, love that. We'll take that," and you walk away with the cash. Given that we're sort of moving into an area where we're getting back to normal, really, in terms of the old post-pandemic petrol starting to burn out a little bit. And what does that mean to what you're going to do where from a flipping or buy reno perspective moving forward, mate?
Yeah, I mean, look, with flipping, you just need a neutral market. So you don't want to be really flipping in a market where there's prices are dropping. You're thinking about it, like whenever you do your feasibility on a flip, you're always basing it on what would I get for this property if I sell it today when it's renovated. Yeah. So you're never taking into consideration future growth. If you're taking into consideration future growth, that's the quickest way to losing money, because you're relying on the market getting you growth, and if it doesn't, then you're stuffed. So even through the boom in Perth, I would never ever do my numbers based on projected growth. It would always be, what's this house worth now renovated? If the deal didn't stack up, I would find something else, because for me, I always need at least that 10%. So let's say, for example, I was all in sort of 600,000 or 700,000, then there needs to be 60 or 70K profit in the deal. Then if I get market growth on top of that, great. So neutral market's fine. I mean, I've got quite a few students in Perth still doing deals. I'm going back to Perth next week, and I've got about 4 or 5 student deals that I'm going to go have a look at. Yeah. And take some photos and video of. And they're still making, really good profits. I mean, the 2 deals I've got in Perth right now are absolute crackers. Like I just picked up a property in East Carrington, a 3x1 on nearly 700 square meters for 400K. So that's, So, and I'm keeping this property long term. It's a buy, rent, and hold. But I picked it up for 400K. Granted, it was November that I got it under contract. It's been a bit of a few months delay, but there hasn't been bugger all growth since November anyway. So picked it up for a steal at 400. It'll be worth 700K renovated, and it's probably a 90K reno, so there'll be over 200K equity in that property. I've also got another one in Kingsley, and I picked up a house, a 3x1 in Kingsley on 809 square meters. I picked it up for 700. So that property as well will be at least mid-9s in Kingsley. So look, there's always deals out there. Doesn't matter the market. Obviously, it's great if the market does some heavy lifting, but for example, this Kingsley one, I only picked it up in January. So yeah, there's always good deals out there. Whether because you're buying other people's problems, right? You're buying houses that are most of the houses I buy, are absolute dumps. Like if you saw the state of this East Cannington one, it would scare you. Like when you were, it was bad.
Yeah, so a lot of your properties sort of off market or pre market, drug properties or deceased estates, or
100%.
what sort of profiles are we talking?
Yeah, so hoarder houses. I definitely have bought one or two drug houses in the past. I've bought, like deceased estates. Like a lot of the time you'll get like, people that just, they inherit a property and it's a burden on them. They just want to get rid of it. Tenants that have trashed houses, that sort of stuff. I've had a few of those where, the people that they just don't want the property anymore. It's emotionally, they're upset with what's happened. I've had people that are wanting to sell property off market because they don't want certain people to know that they're selling and they're, trying to get away from a situation, that sort of stuff. So, but, like I said, these houses are they're not a pretty picture when you're buying them. Like they're usually, like I'd say like of all the properties, there's only been maybe a few that I haven't had to gut. Nearly all of them I've had to gut because they wouldn't be pretty much almost not really rentable as is.
Yeah.
It's the majority of the time I'm gutting it, new kitchen, new bathroom, new flooring, paint inside out. Quite often, new grass and retic. Yeah, usually having to do everything. Like I said, there has been like maybe, 3 or 4, which I've only had to do like a clean up. But yeah, majority of them have been, needing a lot of work.
So the bigger the problem, the bigger the potential profit too, if you do it right. Now, no doubt you've got almost a formula system of
I've got
going through.
100%. I've got like I've got like a pretty much a cookie cutter, reno. So all my renos look the same. All of them look the same because I use the same spec and that sort of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, they're all like, I'm not taking on stuff that's structurally stuffed. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not taking. There's been houses I've been to and I've just ruled it out. I'm like, it's too much work.
Yeah.
I've gone to houses where a car's gone through the front of the house and that sort of stuff. I'm like, I'm not a builder. This is not me. Like I'm not doing this. And quite often those really big projects end up, you got, blowouts and that sort of stuff. Whereas because I stick to cosmetic, rip out the kitchen, you've obviously in WA, everything's pretty much double brick. So it's just, floor and walls when I sort of gut it and then basically put it back together.
Yeah, I love it. Mate, talk us through what your investment strategy was when you first started this and how has it evolved and changed into what you're doing now, where it's going to get you to?
Yeah. So like I said, at the start, it was more about like just building up cash flow and having, having that sort of safety net, I suppose, because we had a few tough years there when I went FIFO and we were pretty tight. But then obviously I did a lot of projects and did really well. So started obviously, building a portfolio as well and doing buy reno hold. So this year I'm moving in more into holding. Still accumulated a decent amount of properties over the last, couple of years. Because I haven't sold everything, but starting to build that portfolio, and there's good equity in those properties because of the buy, rent, and hold. Because I buy them really well, and most of them are at least neutral, if not like they're not stinging me, like they're not really costing me anything to hold on to. So my strategy moving forward is definitely more of that buy, rent, and hold stuff. I'm definitely interested in other markets now, definitely interested in Melbourne, sort of watching Melbourne closely as to what's happening there.
Yep.
Still, there's definitely suburbs at the moment at the bottom end that are starting to have some moderate growth. So I'm sort of watching that area, obviously. Yeah, watching it. Also, but I'm also sort of at the moment doing a lot of research on commercial property as well. Yep. I'm interested in potentially being able to add value to commercial properties, and obviously commercial properties are a lot better for cash flow. So I'm sort of at the moment sort of researching that market as well. Yeah, I'm sort of at a bit of a crossroads at the moment because I'm also interested in like some short. Where I've moved to is a bit of a holiday region in the southwest of WA, so Margaret River region. So lot of Airbnbs and that sort of stuff here, but there's some really new rules and stuff in there that I've sort of found out since I've been here. Some, with a lot of restrictions on what you can actually, only certain zones can be Airbnb and that sort of stuff. So
yeah,
I think I'm definitely going to do some more buy and hold resi, like for sure, buy, reno, hold. Sorry, but I'm definitely looking at commercial as well.
yeah, it's smart. I mean, we dipped our toe in the Airbnb market, and it's like running a 5-star hotel in a house, mate. The expectations are through the roof. The limitations on what you can and can't do because of the supposed, and I say supposed very deliberately, impact that Airbnb properties are having on the rental market, which I think's a load of bollocks personally, but they're a convenient scapegoat to pin the tail on the donkey on when Gavin's looking to point the finger. So I think what you're talking about with the resi and the commercial stuff from a funding a lifestyle perspective makes perfect sense, mate. Mate, you've learned a lot in a very short space of time, and clearly are very good at it. Given your own experience, what do you believe are the absolute critical keys to being successful with flipping? And when I say flipping, I'm saying buy, renovate, and either sell or hold, because it's the buy, renovate piece where you're manufacturing the equity right off the bat.
Yeah, hands down. Like, I've obviously got a lot of students in my program now as well, and the thing that separates the best is that how good they are at sourcing or finding or hunting for deals. Like, like the thing is, some people, they feel uncomfortable having to, put in low offers and that sort of stuff. They feel uncomfortable, dealing directly with people on and off market sales. So, if that's you, you've got to really get comfortable in being uncomfortable in that situation. People like me who are, I suppose, come from a sales background, and you don't even have to come from a sales background. If there's a lot of people out there that are just naturally, they're just wired that way. So if you're someone who, because I worked sales all my life as well, I kind of feel like I never worked for, like I hate salary jobs. Like, like even working for FIFO, it's like I get the same amount of pay. What if I don't do anything?
Yeah.
So I'm just not an employee.
Yeah.
But whereas, so for me, like, a lot of people, though, they're the other way around. They're like, I'm not getting paid to like find properties. I'm not getting paid to do all that. So like, I don't want to put that out that time. And it's like, I'm the opposite. I'm like, build it, find, prospect as much as I can, like, and then, watch the shoots grow, sort of thing. So yeah, I'm all about prospecting, and the people that understand that are the ones that do the best. And I think that goes for any business. Look at, any salesperson, any business. Any business, like, the biggest issue for a business is always leads, right? Like, if you've got plenty of customers, then your business is going to do well. But a lot of people, they struggle with that front end with getting leads and then turning those leads into customers or clients. But it's the same with property flipping. You have to, if you can't find a deal, then you're not going to be able to renovate a house and make any money. But if you're good at networking with agents, getting out and seeing these off-market properties, and if you're good at, like, or you do your letterbox drops and all that sort of stuff and get bites that way, if you're active and good at that, then you do really well.
Yeah, I love it. And I was going to say is that you're right down to knocking on doors and sticking stuff in letterboxes. That, I mean, I'm sure you'd been pretty amazed at some of the responses you'd got from some of the activity that the average Joe's just not even going to pull their finger out and have a go at.
100%. I mean, a lot of people were embarrassed to put their house on the market, and a lot of people hate real estate agents, so they won't actually sell that way. So believe it or not, letterboxes work. I've had most of my success from letterbox shops.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, mate. But if you were starting out again, what, if anything, would you invest your time, energy, money in differently, Graham?
Well, starting again, probably the only thing I would have changed I probably would have held a few more properties in Perth. There was probably only a couple like that I would have held that I, would like to have held looking back now, but it is what it is. I've still, had some good ones and still created some really, really good equity. So, but as far as, look, I don't think anything. Like, I think I've got to where I am because of the learnings and that I've had along the way. So I don't really think that there's anything that I would have changed. Yeah. Just always keep learning and growing, I suppose.
Love it, mate. I'm now going to give you a blindfold and cigarette and ask you the fast 4 questions that you probably get asked in just about every podcast. So that to kick, and I call it the bushfire round, mate, after my nickname. But if you could have a coffee with anyone, and they can be alive or dead or an historical figure, who would you choose and why?
Michael Jordan. Well, he's just, obviously loves sport, but for him, he was just, probably the greatest athlete of all time, in my opinion. And just his mindset and his just absolute killer instinct and, just an assassin on I just think he was, it's just so mentally tough. Like there was, just handled pressure so well. And I think sport and business go pretty well together.
Yeah.
So I think he would, everyone just thinks he's the god. I mean, I think if you look at any older guys in the, NBA guys and all that sort of stuff, they all have him on the pedestal. And I'm not saying basketball is like definitely one of my favorite sports. Not saying it is my favorite sport, but if I think of all the sports that that I follow, and I just think he's that one guy that just stands out to me.
Yeah, mate, he not only was a legend on the court, but given the deal he did with Nike, he's a pretty substantial property investor too, mate. He owns some very expensive property all over the States, mate.
Well, I mean, and look at the deal he did with the Hornets. Like he obviously bought that, and I think he bought it for, well, I think 100 and something million or whatever. I don't quite remember on these numbers, but then sold it for $1 billion or whatever. So he's made significant money as a businessman as well. But I mean, obviously with his with Nike, it's he pretty much changed the whole industry for shoes and that for the whole league and for every other generation after him. So, pretty impressive.
Absolute trailblazer, mate. What's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
Look, I think the best piece of advice is only to follow those who have done what you want to do. So, I think a lot of people have a lot of fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of what others think. And too many people have great ideas or all that sort of stuff, and then they don't follow through because their mate who is not achieved anything is telling them it's not a good idea, or their mum and dad who, are not well off either are telling them, no, that's a bad idea. So only, listen and follow those who have done what you want to achieve. And I think the worst advice is, and this has actually been a lot. There's a lot of property guys out there saying it at the moment. But I think the whole buy your own home, pay up the mortgage. I think that's a terrible idea. I mean, it might have worked back in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. But the young people now, and especially people that might live in Sydney, for example, where prices are even more expensive. So just go out and buy your own home, you're essentially setting yourself up in a trap. And I'm proof of that. Like I bought I had the $1 million mortgage when I was 20, 28, 29 or whatever I was. And it was like having the handcuffs on that property. It was like having the handcuffs on. So that's why, even though could easily go and buy a nice house now, but I haven't, because I'm just aware that if by investing in property, I can make my money work for me. Whereas by spending a few million on a owner occupier home, you're not getting any return on that.
No, and the interesting thing is that it locks you out from doing anything else, because the massive mortgage prevents you doing it, and every cost associated with that property is coming out of your after-tax money, versus an investment property where, if you configure it right, over 90% of the cost has been covered by the tenant, the tax office. So it's a no-brainer. And mate, I don't want to get on my high horse here, because I 100% agree with you. But the reason why over 73% of retirees over the age of 65 are surviving on just over 15 grand a year right now is because they made the mistake of thinking that paying off the home loan and putting money into super is going to fund their lifestyle. And I've done the numbers, mate. I've written a book that's gone into that subject and compared the two, and it's chalk and cheese when it comes to the outcomes. So, mate, you've hit a hot button for me on that one, mate, because it's absolutely 100%.
For sure. I mean, look, I said we're living. Well, you're from WA, yeah. So, are you from WA or not?
No, I live in WA. I'm a bit of a gypsy, mate. I've lived in most states actually.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm just down in Yallingup now, which is like beautiful part of the world, sort of thing. And there's a block of land on the street. Like it's a very established area where I am. There's only about 150 houses in Yallingup on the hill, and like there's a block of land. So obviously, there's someone's knocked down an old shaft or whatever, but that block's on the market for $3.5 million now, and that's on the street that I live in. Now, to build on that, the person's not getting any change out of probably another $3 million on the build, right? So, I mean, the house I'm living in, it's a nice house. It's certainly not a luxury house, but the location, it's you wouldn't. The house is still worth millions, right? Because now I'm paying $1,200 a week here.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
So, if I was to buy this house, I can tell you what, I'd be paying a hell of a lot more than $1,200 a week.
4 times that, mate, at least. So, absolute no-brainer. I mean, I like you. I was a rent investor for years. And then picked up where we wanted to live right at the end of the journey, not the beginning of the journey, because the portfolio funded it. Not a popular way to go, because I think way too many Aussies' egos getting in the way of look at me. Massive mistake from that regard. Whereas I just love the flexibility of we rented for a long time and lived in places that are at a fraction of the cost that it would have if we had been paying the mortgage on the same place. So I love your thinking.
Sure.
But third question in the ambush round: what superpower do you wish you had and why?
Predict the future. Oh, look, I mean, if you could predict the future, then you'd know what to buy, wouldn't you? Like you'd know what. Obviously, we can look at data and we know what's happening somewhat, but if I could predict the future and I could see exactly what was going to happen, where and when, then it'd be a very good, very easy way to make money.
100%. There's a lot of people who pretend they can predict the future in property, mate, and I think about 99.9% of them are always wrong. Because it makes me laugh, mate. Given the number of variables that affect property conditions, I don't go near property predictions for that very reason, because the chances are you are going to be wrong. So, but I love that. Last one, what's a sort of a daily happy habit that you've employed that you reckon's contributed most to your success today?
Like, I just think for me, it's just like always been positive mindset. Like my morning routine, it changes all the time. Like, so I'm not someone who every day does the same thing. Like, I'm just not that person, but I am a morning person, and and I always get up and I always, I'm always motivated to, for another day sort of thing. So I can't turn around and tell you that it's, that I get up and I've been going for a walk for the last 10 years, or I've been doing the same run for the last year, or I've been going to the same, like that's not the case.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just like I'm a morning person. I always get up, and it's my mindset, and I'm always like, I'm always focused and that sort of thing. So that's difficult one for me to answer. I don't think I gave you the answer that you were looking for.
No, there is no right or wrong answer. And my mindset is the piece that most people attach themselves to a thing where they're not thinking that what's on the inside and in between your ears is going to have the biggest impact on whatever you achieve in life, good or bad. And very few people, most Australians are like this. They're pointing outwards at why, you mentioned earlier, why there's a reason or an excuse why something hasn't happened. But if you turn inwardly and think about how are you thinking and what are you attracting into your life as a result, if you're putting energy into that every day, mate, there's no wonder you're doing well.
Yep, absolutely.
Mate, look, we could talk for hours, but I really want to thank you for taking the time to share your very interesting FIFO to flipping personal journey so far, mate. But before we go, for those that are listening, if you'd like to keep the conversation going in a very safe and open forum where you can take your property knowledge to the next level by sharing and learning with other like-minded property investors and property professionals, where you can get all of your property questions answered, then join Eddie, the Frenchman, myself, and a host of others now on the Property Hub Collective Facebook page by clicking the link in the show notes. We now look forward to continuing our conversation with Graham in next week's episode, where we're going to unpack his secrets to property flipping to buy, renovate, hold and or sell. So remember to always get invested in your knowledge and your network before you invest in assets. And we look forward to getting invested with you again then, Graham.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Look forward to the following up on the next chat.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. Make sure you subscribe to Property Hub for free. Get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's top online property show for red-hot property investing news and insights direct from industry leaders and influencers. And finally, I'll see you next time.